In the previous video, we assumed that analysts would be making estimates of the expected return and using that to be able to decide how we do portfolio analysis. However, in a lot of the current trends, analysts do not particularly forecast expected returns, but they rather make this sort of five numbered set of recommendations. Okay, and they recommend these rankings, and based on that, investors are able to decide whether they want to invest in a particular asset or not. So they create these 5 groups. These are analysts who last in the previous section we thought that they are going to be estimating expected returns. Okay, so right now they're creating these 5 groups, which is strong buy, hold, sell, and strong sell. Again, based on these groups, investors can look at it and decide if they want to include a particular asset from a particular group into their portfolio or not. So, we need to, in order to be able to use this information, we need to first determine how the groupings were formed in the first place. Okay, that should say formed. So the common belief is that these estimates were formed without the consideration of the risk characteristics. So how could we use this data if there was no consideration of the risk characteristics being done? So big picture idea, there's a lot more detail in the textbook, remember, but you can create an index group out of an index fund out of the top group or groups. Okay, so let's say we just want to combine these 2 groups, we could create an index fund that consists of just the strong buy and buy groups. The way we've created that is explained in the textbook, but what it results in is it creates this thing that performs like an enhanced return index fund. Okay, so it will perform better than what you'd get than a regular index fund. The other thing we could do is we could construct a minimum risk portfolio out of the top group or groups. So let's say that we can't differentiate between securities in the top group based on expected return. Okay, we assign them all the same expected return. Okay, that's what you do, right? If you can't estimate which one has a higher expected return, you know that they all belong to the same group. You're gonna just assume that they all have the same expected return. Okay, then we use that information to just pick out the securities that have the lowest risk out of all of them that are in that particular group. Which brings us back to something that we've been talking about in the efficient portfolio, right? At the same return, we want to pick assets with the lowest risk. At the same risk, we want to pick assets with the highest return. So here, if we're calling all of them having the same expected return, we could just pick the assets that have the lowest risk, and through that, we've constructed a minimum risk portfolio out of the top group. Now, what if we believe that the groups are formed based on expected returns, but no assumption based on risk? Okay, so if we form groups based on expected return, we would hold each security in a group in the same proportion. That's the first thing. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's say there are 10 assets in the strong buy group. Now, if we assume that they're formed based on expected return but no assumptions about risk, we could hold each of those 10 assets in that group with a weight of 1 over n. Okay, and what's 1 over n? 1 over n is 1 over 10, which is 0.1. Okay, we'd give a 0.1 weight to each of the assets within the strong buy group. Now, all groups should be held that give you an expected return that's above the risk-free rate. Okay, so even if the third group, let's say the hold group, was giving you a return that was above the risk-free rate, you would pick that as well. You'd hold all these 3 groups, and within the group, you would hold each asset with a weight 1 over n. Now, the next question comes, so we figured out how we hold our assets within each group. Okay, we give equal weights to each group. But let's say we have 100% of our money, and we're trying to say what percent of our investment goes into the strong buy group, what percent of our investment goes into the buy group. Okay, so we're just going to consider the top 2 groups. So within each of those groups, we know that we'll divide we'll put equal weights for all the assets. Now we're trying to find how we split our money between these two big groups. Okay, the proportion invested in each group is proportional to the group's excess return. Okay, what's an excess return? It's that sort of premium. Okay, it's the expected return above RF. Okay, what's RF? The risk-free rate. So here's the formula that's going to be important to remember. Okay, the proportion of the weights, x1 over x2, let's say x1 is the amount to invest in group 1, x2 is the amount to invest in group 2. Okay, that proportion, x1 over x2, is going to be just the ratio of the expected return of the group 1 minus the risk-free rate divided by the expected return of group 2 minus its risk-free rate. Okay, so our goal right now is to find out how we're going to split our overall money between the two big groups. Let's do an example about that. So let's say that we have R1 is 7%, R bar 1, which means the expected return of group 1 is 7%, the expected return of group 2 is 8%, the risk-free rate is 4%. Okay, assume we want to invest $1 million between groups 1 and 2. So our total investment is $1 million. So we're trying to see what percentage will go into group 1, what percentage of that $1 million will go into group 2. So that's the question. Okay, how much are we going to invest in group 1? How much are we going to invest in group 2? So basically our formula, if you remember, is x1 over x2 is equal to R1 bar minus RF divided by R2 bar minus RF. So what do we have for R1 bar? It's 7%. 7% minus 4% divided by 8% minus 4%. Okay, if we do that calculation, we're going to get 3 over 4, right? 3% over 4%, which is just 3 over 4. Okay, so we have x1 over x2 equals 3 over 4. Note though, this does not tell us how much we're investing in x1 or how much we're investing in x2. Okay, it's just the ratio of those two is 3 over 4. Okay, we need to find out how we're actually going to split our money between x1 and x2. How do we go about doing that? So we could rewrite that first of all. We could say x1. So if I just bring this x2 up to the top, this x2 up to the top, so I multiply it here, we get x1 equals 3 over 4 x2. But this is just one equation. We can't really solve for two unknowns if we have just one equation. We need to know some other equation that's going to help us solve these for these values. So what do we know? We know that we're going to invest 100% of our assets in x1 and x2, in groups 1 and group 2. What does that mean? That means that x1 plus x2 should equal 100% or 1. Okay, x1 plus x2 is equal to 1. So let's call this equation 1. Let's call this equation 2. Okay, we could use 1 and 2, and now we're able to solve it. Okay, so how do we do that? So we know now that x1 is 3 over 4 x2. So we could use that. We could plug in this value in here and then solve for x2. Okay, so let's do that. So we get 3 over 4 x2 plus x2 is equal to 1. Okay, now we can rewrite x2 as 4 over 4, okay, just to make the addition easier. So we have 3 over 4 x2 plus 4 over 4 x2 is equal to 1. I didn't change anything here, right? 4 over 4 is still equal to 1. That's what we had before. So I'm just doing it to make the calculation easier. The other thing you could do is just cross multiply. Okay, if you know this is a 1, you could take the denominator of 4 and cross multiply and you get the same final outcome. But anyway, so we get, what's 3 over 4 x2 plus 4 over 4 x2? That is 7 over 4 x2. 7 over 4 x2 is equal to 1. And if we want to solve for x2, then we can just take this to the other side. We multiply both sides by 4 over 7, and we're going to get x2 is equal to 4 over 7. Okay, now we know from here, we know that x1 is 3 over 4 x2. Okay, so whatever value we have for x2, if we multiply that by 3 over 4, we should get the value for x1 as well. So let's do that. x1 is equal to 3 over 4 x2, which is equal to 3 over 4 times 4 over 7. Right? And I just plugged in the numbers, right? Here's 4 over 7. The 4's cancel, and we're left with 3 over 7. Okay, so now we get x1 is equal to 3 over 7. x2 is equal to 4 over 7. Okay, that's our weights, right? The amount of weight we're putting in each group, in group 1 and group 2. We had a total of $1 million. We have $1 million to invest. And now we know what weights we're going to put them on. We're going to put them in 3 over 7 for x1 and 4 over 7 for x2. So let's find the dollar values that we put in x1, okay? So in x1 is going to be 3 over 7 times 1 million. And that turns out to be 428,000. 428. Here, let me write on the next line. $428,571.43. Okay. Similarly, x2 would be 4 over 7 times 1 million. And that turns out to be 571,428.57. I think it's kind of cool how these numbers flip. This was 428,571. This is 571,428. Okay. The other way you could have gone in x2 is just do 1 million minus this number, and you'd get the same final outcome. Okay. So now we've determined how we can split our money. So now all our assets within group 1 will have a total investment of 428,571. All our assets in group 2 would be split between 571 $428.57. And so we've determined how we could go about using discrete data in order to create our portfolio selection.